You sit down to study, you open your notes, and within 4 minutes you are watching a video about how roller coasters are engineered, texting someone you have not spoken to in 3 years, and genuinely questioning whether your current career path is the right one. Sound familiar? Here is the part that will actually sting. The problem is not your discipline. The problem is your method. Research from cognitive science consistently shows that the way most people study, rereading, highlighting, staring at notes for long stretches, produces almost no durable retention. You are not learning. You are performing the appearance of learning, and there is a significant difference. The good news is that the gap between how you currently study and how you could study is not a matter of effort. It is a matter of strategy. A handful of specific research-backed techniques can compress hours of ineffective studying into far shorter sessions that actually work. These are not hacks in the gimmicky sense. They are principles drawn from decades of cognitive psychology research. And once you understand why they work, you will not want to study any other way. Start here. Your brain is not lazy. It is efficient. Left to its own devices, it will always find the path of least resistance, and that is not a character flaw. It is basic neurology. The problem is that the path of least resistance rarely leads to real learning. So the first technique is about using that efficiency against itself. It's called leveraging Parkinson's law, and it might be the most immediately practical thing in this entire video. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Cyril Northcote Parkinson, a British historian, observed this in bureaucratic contexts in the 1950s, but it applies with brutal accuracy to studying. When you tell yourself you have 3 hours to study, your brain does not allocate 3 hours of focused effort. It allocates 3 hours of loosely study-adjacent activity, punctuated by actual productive work. The fix is to shrink the container. Set a timer for 20 minutes and assign a precise task to that window. Not study biology, but understand and be able to explain the process of photosynthesis. Specific, bounded, finite. Your brain stops resisting because 20 minutes feels survivable. And once you start, momentum builds naturally. 1 sprint becomes 2. 2 becomes 4. You have done more in 2 hours of structured sprints than you would have in an undirected 5-hour session. Now, working faster only matters if you are working on the right things. That's where the Pareto principle comes in, better known as the 80-20 rule. The core idea is this: roughly 20% of inputs produce 80% of outputs. Applied to studying, it means that a small fraction of the material you could learn accounts for the vast majority of your results. Most students study uniformly, as if every page deserves equal attention. That's a strategy that rewards effort over intelligence, and not in a good way. The smarter approach is to identify what actually matters before you begin. Look at past exams, read the course summary, ask directly what the recurring themes are, then allocate the bulk of your study time, 80% of it, to that core 20%. Not because the rest is worthless, but because time is finite and returns are not equal. Perfectionism in studying is often just anxiety wearing a productive costume. Work smarter. Target ruthlessly. With your time constraints set and your material prioritized, the next step is activating urgency. There's a reason you suddenly become capable of extraordinary focus the night before a deadline, and it's not the panic, it's the clarity. When time is genuinely limited, your brain drops the optional and locks on to the essential. You can replicate that state on demand with a simple structure. Study in focused sprints of 25 to 30 minutes, followed by a 5-minute break where you actually move away from the desk. Walk, stretch, look out a window. This is not a reward. It is neurological maintenance. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for sustained concentration, fatigues like a muscle. Short breaks prevent the accumulation of mental fatigue that turns the 2nd and 3rd hours of a session into pure performance. The break is part of the method, not a concession to weakness. Now here is where the real leverage is. The technique that cognitive scientists consistently rank as among the most effective learning strategies ever studied is something called active recall, and most people never use it. Instead, they reread, they highlight, they copy notes. These methods feel productive because they're effortless. But effortlessness in learning is a red flag. Passive review produces familiarity, not memory. The difference matters enormously. Familiarity is that feeling of recognition when you see something. Oh yes, I've seen this. Memory is the ability to retrieve it independently. On an exam, you are asked for memory. Familiarity is useless. Active recall works by doing the opposite of rereading. You close your notes. You cover the page. You attempt to retrieve the information from scratch with nothing to prompt you. This is uncomfortable. Your brain will resist it. That resistance is the point, because retrieval difficulty is the mechanism that drives encoding depth. A landmark study by Roediger and Karpicke, published in Psychological Science, demonstrated that students who used test-based retrieval practice retained significantly more information over a week than students who spent the same time rereading. The gap was not subtle. The retrieval group outperformed the rereading group by a considerable margin, even though both groups felt equally confident. One of the simplest implementations of this is a technique called blurting. Read a section, then immediately turn the page over and write down everything you can remember without looking. Then check what you missed. The gaps are your actual learning agenda. Everything you remembered correctly needed no further attention. This is precision studying. From retrieval, move to explanation. The Feynman Technique, named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, who was as famous for his ability to teach complex ideas simply as for his scientific work, is built on one foundational principle. If you cannot explain something in plain language, you do not understand it yet. You only think you do. The method is straightforward. Take a concept you're studying, explain it out loud or in writing as if you were teaching it to someone with no background in the subject at all. Use no jargon. Use no borrowed language from the textbook. Use your own words, your own analogies, your own structure. The moment you get stuck, and you will, that is not failure. That is the most valuable signal the technique produces. That is exactly where the gap in your understanding lives. Go back, fill it, then try the explanation again. Repeat until there are no gaps left. What you can explain simply, you own. What you cannot explain simply, you are only renting from short-term memory. The final piece is one that most people know intellectually, but consistently underinvest in: sleep and physical movement. Your brain does not consolidate what you study while you're awake. It consolidates during sleep, specifically during slow wave and REM stages that dominate the latter half of a full night's rest. This is not metaphor, it is process. The hippocampus replays and transfers the day's learning into longer-term cortical storage during sleep. Cutting sleep short does not save time. It discards the investment you made during the hours you spent studying. 7 to 8 hours is not a luxury. It is the minimum for effective memory consolidation in adults. And exercise, even low-intensity movement like a 10-minute walk, increases cerebral blood flow and elevates levels of brain-derived neurotrophic protein, a protein that promotes neural connection formation and enhances the brain's capacity to encode new information. You do not need a gym, you need to move. So here is the complete system distilled. Use Parkinson's law to set short, specific study sprints that force focus. Use the 80-20 rule to identify and prioritize the material that actually matters. Use timed sessions with real breaks to maintain attention without burnout. Use active recall and blurting to build retrievable memory instead of passive familiarity. Use the Feynman technique to expose and close every gap in your understanding, and protect your sleep and movement the same way you protect your study time, because without them, the rest of the system leaks. The single most important thing to understand about all of this is that better studying is not about trying harder. It is about creating the conditions under which your brain can do what it is already designed to do: encode, connect, and retain. You are not fighting your brain. You are finally working with it. Pick one technique from today and apply it in your next session. Not tomorrow, today. Because the difference between people who learn fast and people who do not is not intelligence. It is the willingness to test a better method once and see what happens.